All right, continuing on with our discussion on social structures, another important facet of social structures is that they are very durable, right? So when we say that social structures are durable, what we're really saying is that they were socially constructed with the intent to withstand challenges made against them by individual actors or agents in society. All right. So if we think back to our example of gender as a social structure, right? What would happen if a man were to wear lipstick or if a woman were to give herself a buzz cut, right? Both of these individual behaviors are challenges against the social structure of gender, right? Men in our society are taught to believe that men don't wear lipstick. Women in our society are taught to believe that they should have long hair, right? These are gender norms that are ingrained within our society. Yet hundreds, probably thousands of individuals choose to challenge different aspects of the social structure of gender every single day. Now, does that mean that the social structure of gender crumbles to the ground and no longer exists because some or even many individuals choose to challenge it? No, it does not, right? So that proves how durable social structures are in our society. And the reason social structures are often so durable is because they get built into the institutions within our society, and those institutions kind of protect them, right? So we talked a little bit before about how the social structure of gender in many ways is ingrained into our government, our political structure, right? Women were denied the right to vote, and it took them many, many years, a number of women, to collectively fight against the social structure of gender, to reconstruct the social structure of government in our society to enable women to get the right to vote, to be elected into office, right? The social structure of gender is also embedded within the institution of the workforce, right? For many years, women were told the workforce is not your place is in the home. So even though many women didn't believe in that aspect of the social structure of gender, many women wanted to enter the paid workforce, they faced these institutionalized barriers that denied them access for long periods of time. So social structures don't just exist in a vacuum, right? It's not like we can just talk about issues of gender inequality and only look at gender. We also need to consider how they intersect with many other social structures and institutions in our society. How does gender inequality get affected by the social structure of the workforce, by the social structure of the government, by the social structure of race, by the social structure of socioeconomic status? So social problems can be really tricky here when we think about how durable these social structures are constructed to be, because they are ingrained into the fabric of our society. So this kind of leads us into this connection between social structures and inequality. Social structures can be beneficial for society in some ways, in that they kind of provide us stability by providing these predictable patterns of human behavior, right? By almost limiting our choices or the opportunities that are available to us. It can make life easier in some aspects. As a man, if I wake up in the morning and I don't need to consider if I'm going to put on pants or a dress, if I'm going to put on lipstick or not, if when I go to the bathroom, I don't need to consider if I'm going to use the men's room or the women's room. It limits our decisions and it limits our opportunities in ways which might sound kind of mundane and even stupid as examples. But think about how more complicated our life would be if we needed to scrutinize and analyze every single decision that we made, right? About what we wear, what we eat, how we present ourselves, how we talk to other individuals, when it's okay to go up to individuals to talk to them, what spaces we have access to, right? We would be in information overload. Our brains would explode from thinking so much. So in some ways, social structures simplify our lives and they enable us to function more effectively in society. However, they can also clearly contribute to the production of inequalities by limiting opportunities for certain groups of people and by opening up opportunities for other groups of people. So at different times in U.S. history, The social structure of government denied women the right to vote, thereby opening up a number of doors for men that were not accessible for women. The social structure of education denied African Americans access to schools, thereby opening up many more opportunities for white people than people of color. And the social structure of family denied same-gender couples the right to get married, thereby opening up a number of opportunities for man-woman couples that were not accessible to same-gender couples. So in all of these ways, we need to be very critical and conscious of how social structures, while they may contribute some good things to our society, can also contribute to a number of problems in society. So a social problem is the term we will use to refer to any social condition that negatively affects the quality of life for a large number of people, okay? Social problems are often the result of inequalities produced by social structures. So as we talked about, the social structure of gender in our society has produced a lot of inequalities specifically for women and other gender minorities in our society. But also, the social structure of gender has produced a lot of problems for men. In a couple of weeks, we'll talk more specifically about how these standards of life, these norms and expectations to follow these strict gender roles are really harmful in many ways for not only women, but also men in our society. So what makes a problem a social problem? Well, there are 4 criteria that we're going to focus on for this class, and this is definitely something that could be subjective, and I'm sure we could think of other criteria that we could add to this list, but just for simplicity, we're going to focus on these 4. So the first thing that a social problem must possess is that it must be social in origin, meaning it's something that's caused by social factors, all right? So one example, if there's an earthquake, right, that is definitely a problem for a society, but it's not necessarily a social problem. Now, if we could connect that earthquake to some sort of social structures or social demographics, we could definitely start and see the connections to social problems. For example, when an earthquake strikes a country that is in poverty, right? The majority of people in that country are impoverished and they don't have the economic ecostructure to rebuild their homes and their businesses and etc. That becomes a social problem because we see that that earthquake was particularly catastrophic to a large number of people who are of a lower socioeconomic status. In comparison to, say, if there was an earthquake in Los Angeles, yes, it would still be devastating, but the United States has the economy that would enable them to rebuild the businesses and the homes and address all of the havoc that earthquake caused here because our country has more money than other countries around the world, right? So social problems must be social in origin. They have to be caused by social factors rather than physical or naturally occurring factors. Social problems must be harmful to many individuals, and many is kind of an arbitrary term here, you know. Typically when we're talking about many, we're talking about a large group of people, a large number of individuals, you know, whether that's 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000, again, can be kind of subjective. It depends on the context. But if, you know, I got fired from my job, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was caused by a social problem. It might have been just a personal trouble that I have. You know, maybe I didn't show up for work for 4 consecutive shifts just because I would rather have stayed home and played video games, right? That's not really indicative of a social problem. That's more of an individualistic choice, right? Now, if myself and 200 of my coworkers all got laid off because there was the plant that we worked at decided that they were going to get rid of a number of positions and start bringing in robots to do the work that we were previously doing on an assembly line, then we might see a social problem, right? Because myself and hundreds of others of individuals lost our jobs, not necessarily because we were bad workers or lazy, but because the organization that we work for is trying to save money by paying less people, right? So it needs to be harmful to a number of individuals, and again, must be rooted in social factors. A third characteristic is that it must harm society and that it threatens what we believe society should be. So again, going back to that example about hundreds of workers getting laid off, we have a very strong value in society about the placing a significant importance on our work ethic as Americans, right? This idea that we work hard to accomplish things for ourselves. So if hundreds of people lost their jobs in the same region, because all of the manufacturing companies got bought up by this larger company that was really greedy and just focused on making money instead of preserving the lives and the well-being of the thousands of workers in that community, that would be really threatening and harmful because it would challenge this core belief that a large group in our society shared. And lastly, a number of people have to agree that the conditions should change, right? So social problems, anything becomes a problem when people recognize collectively that something isn't right, right? So if it's just one or two individuals that disagree with something because it goes against a personal preference that they have, that's probably not justification to label something as a social problem. But if, again, we start seeing dozens, hundreds, thousands of people collectively agreeing, yes, there's something wrong here and we need to do something about it, that's typically a good indication that we're dealing with a social problem. So let's start talking a little bit about social problems and their connection to social change. So it's really important to note that in times in history, behaviors like denying women the right to vote or denying African Americans the options to attend certain schools were considered normal behaviors, right? Today, we might look back and think, how could that ever be? How could we ever have denied women the right to vote? How could we ever have denied African Americans the right to go to any school that they want? That seems so ridiculous. But back then, when it was happening, just 50 to 100 years ago for these particular cases, it was not considered abnormal. It was normal to them that women and African Americans would have limited opportunities, right? And that's because social structures are created and maintained by humans, specifically humans who benefit from their existence, right? The social structure of gender in the United States, as you may have guessed, was largely constructed by men, right? We live in a society that's referred to as a patriarchy, where men have power, right? When the colonists came from England and settled in the colonies in what is now the United States, men were running the show, right? Men were in charge of government. They were in charge of their local communities. They made all of the decisions. Women were literally considered to be the property of their husbands. So men were able to set up this social structure of gender in society that enabled them to maintain their position of power and privilege. And it's something that continues to negatively affect women today, right? In the upcoming weeks, when we talk more about gender specifically and social problems connected to gender, we'll see all of these inequalities that are still negatively impacting women in our society today. And that's stemming from the history of patriarchy in the United States. So it's important to recognize that social structures don't just come out of thin air. They're socially constructed by people in society, and most often they are socially constructed by people who have power in society. And people that have power want to keep their power. So the best way to do that is to ensure that the social structures in society are in alignment with allowing them to maintain their position of power and privilege. So how does change come about then? How can you possibly alter a social structure, especially if you're at the bottom of the food chain in that social structure? Well, social change is often brought about by groups of people who experience oppression from social structures. So during the suffrage movement about 100 years ago, when women were fighting to get the right to vote, it wasn't just one or two women that were pissed off that they couldn't vote. It was hundreds, thousands of women collectively mobilizing and saying, we demand that we make this change to the social structure of gender in our society and get fair treatment in comparison to men. We saw the same thing about 10 years ago with the Occupy Wall Street movement during the Great Recession in the United States. We had thousands of working class Americans saying they're getting sick of treated as second class citizens when they're these, rich elitists in American culture that are able to just buy themselves out of any problem that they have. And more currently, we're definitely seeing this now with the Black Lives Matter movement and the Me Too movement, where people of color and women and gender and sexual minorities, again, collectively mobilizing to fight against the systems of oppression that they're facing as a result of these social structures in society, right? So just to wrap things up here, while individual challenges may not affect social structures, right? Like we said, social structures are durable. They're built to withstand the challenges of individuals. The collective efforts, collective changes, or collective acts of mobilization can change social structures. And we've seen that in all those examples. The suffrage movement, Black Lives Matter is definitely starting to make a difference now in society, and that's because it's collectively changing, right? Think of how the social structure of gender has shifted over time. Women previously not able to vote or own property. They were expected to take care of the home. That's definitely changing. So as groups of people recognize their oppression, they're able to engage in these acts of social change.